All right. Welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Friday, so the free for all day, and love to hear from you. Always want to hear from you. Friday, especially though, and I generally don't have guests or co-hosts on Fridays, but every now and then I do. Not today though. Just you and I. I will be on probably just till about 1, and then we'll call it a show for the week. And next week will be on Monday, not Tuesday. Just a little bit of housekeeping. It'll be a Monday with Arlen. I mentioned no Carlos. We're working to see if we can figure something out with Carlos. We got some other great co-hosts joining us though next week, including one who's been on before, Chuck Pinocchio with SPUCA, State-Based Universal Healthcare, and also Don, I believe, is going to be joining us Thursday. So we're looking forward to that. He'll be a new co-host or a new guest. So looking forward to that as well. Yeah, you know what? We had Mike on yesterday, extraordinaire organizer. I guess you'd say extraordinary organizer or extraordinary organizer extraordinaire. And Mike and I are, he's a close friend, dear friend. I really like him. But, it kind of reminded me, the frustration I feel when I talk to people who are involved in the Democratic Party or, work closely with the Democratic Party or who work with groups that ultimately are, I guess, aligned with the Democratic Party, at least aligned with many of their electeds. And the frustration, the failure on my part to make a case that is compelling to them, that we just have no choice, but we have to look for and we have to promote alternatives to the Democratic Party. And it does upset me. It frustrates me. And I have at times lashed out at people who I believe are not open because of their professional ties to the Democratic Party or to groups that are aligned with the Democratic Party. And this includes people at National Nurses United, Progressive Democrats of America, certainly Our Revolution. And I so understand my frustration. I so understand why I get angry, but that doesn't excuse rude behavior, dismissive behavior. Now, I might have to say I'm not saying that's how I was with Mike. I don't think I was. And, I think Mike is very honest, and I think he has a lot of integrity, and he believes what he believes, but he still ultimately takes a different tack, shall we say, than I do when it comes to the need for promoting something very, very different than the two-party system that we currently find ourselves mired in, that we find is doing so much damage, so much harm to our world. And I just get, I have to acknowledge that because of my privilege, my great fortune, that I'm able to be truly independent of any influences, right? Of any financial influences. I can just come on every, weekday for an hour and spout my views. I don't have to worry about offending any powerful or even not so powerful, but somewhat well-heeled institution that pays me a salary. I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about whether someone's going to support me when I run for, when I want a promotion in an organization that depends on so-called progressive, affluent progressives to raise money. I don't have to do that. And so I'm in a very, very good place for me in that regard. But look, ultimately the end is the end. I mean, if either we want healthcare, Medicare for all, single payer health coverage, either we will take the profits out of healthcare, the death panels that the big pharma and for-profit healthcare have imposed on us. Either we take them out or we don't. And the Democratic Party ain't going to do that. Either we stop war and promote peace or we don't. And the Democratic Party has made it clear it won't do that. Now, I get it. There are people, some really good people. Graham Plattner, he talks a great game, and I think he will really push for peace. Mamdani has talked a great game, but he won't primary Hakeem Jeffries. Did he endorse Jeffries? I'm not sure if he did, but he certainly won't primary him. I like Tallarico. I think these are decent people. I think they want to do what's best, but They're in that barrel of rotten apples, that rotten Democratic barrel. And you can't go into that barrel without being tainted, without being, made rotten, in, at least in significant and important ways. We've got, if we want to keep these people honest as well, we have to be able to threaten their jobs from the left they have to know once they get into that comfortable place, Gracie Mansion, it's really nice. I don't know how great it is inside, where the mayor of New York lives. Up on the Upper East Side, it's right on the Hudson River. It's really nice. Once you're in there, you kind of forget. How can you not? Where you came from. And Mamdani come from pretty much upper middle class background anyway. But you forget pretty quickly if you came from more of a hard scrabble background, like AOC did. I know there's all this revisionism about AOC. Well, she lived up in Pleasantville or whatever it was, an hour north of New York. She went to high school, at least I think Pleasantville High, may be wrong. It's pretty nice up there, but she didn't live in any kind of, fancy house. It was, as far as I could tell, a small 3-bedroom, nothing extravagant, nothing especially nice. But you forget, even if she did struggle to get healthcare, I knew she was a bartender who maybe she had a few points in the bar. That's what people say. Oh, well, she wasn't really poor. But it doesn't matter. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't from a rich background. She still had to struggle. You forget about it. You get healthcare. And man, you're like, I want this. I want to keep this. You forget that other people, the people who voted for you, are desperate for you to fight for them. And you start thinking, it's really nice here. The people have pretty good manners. They're polite. They don't yell at me. The people at these fundraisers, whoever it is I'm trying to raise money from, they're tell me how great I am and compliment me. Kind of want to do nice things for them. Then you think, and if I do something good for them, they're going to do something really nice for me. The only way to prevent that is if we are threatening them, the Democrats, the progressive Democrats from the left, with constant threat of extinction. You're going to lose your job. You don't vote for Medicare for all. You don't co-sponsor Medicare for all. You do call for Hakeem Jeffries to be able to run uncontested. We're going to challenge you immediately. That's the only way. Now, I get it. Mamdani's got 4 years. So you can't challenge him immediately, but you can immediately call it out. And you can also be a force that can say, okay, the Democrats aren't going to primary Hakeem Jeffries. Well, we are. We are going to challenge him from the left. We are going to challenge him from a pro-peace, pro-working class place. And that's the only way. 240-242-5646. Great to see Ken and CP and D in the chat. Love to get some more folks as well in there. 240-242-5646. By the way, CP, I do like Mamdani. I did endorse Mamdani. But what I'm saying is, even somebody who I think really has good instincts, good principles, he still shades, he's still like, well, let's not primary Jeffries. And he does endorse Kathy Hochul to be reelected. And that's not what we need in this moment, ultimately. We need just, completely, uncompromising voices against the elites. And, we're not, look, this is just horrific what we're seeing. The warmongering by Trump is so awful. And the news and again, it's a free-for-all, it's a Friday, so we're kind of focusing on stories that we've been covering all week. So we talked a little bit about the attack on the elementary school, where now it looks like over 175 people were killed, the majority of whom school girls. 600 miles from Tehran. Deadliest known episode of civilian casualties in this war. Nobody's taking responsibility, but the New York Times, to its credit, look, I criticize New York Times all the time, but they do research, they do reportage, they do break news, which I really don't. I just tell you what I read. I try to analyze it and give give my take and what we need to do about it. But the New York Times actually provides you with information that you can't get elsewhere. So this, and I looked for this. As far as I can tell, the only place this has been published is in NYT. The body of evidence assembled by the New York Times, including newly released satellite imagery, social media posts, and verified videos, indicate that the school building, which the New York Times, which by the way, the Trump administration did not acknowledge responsibility for hitting, which I opined on this program was Israel's atrocity, just one more, throw it on the pile of Israeli atrocities. What Israel claimed, at least some, they tried to start like a viral whisper campaign that really was friendly fire. That went nowhere. According to the New York Times, based on their analysis, it was American missile that killed all those little girls. And they based that on simultaneous hits in the same region, which were also by U.S. weapons. There was an acknowledgement by the U.S. military that they were attacking naval targets right near there. So it seems clear that they are very, very likely the culprits. And apparently, Caroline Leavitt didn't quite deny it. She just said, well, we haven't determined yet. She didn't say, we didn't do it. She said, we haven't yet determined it. Now, if she said we didn't do it, I wouldn't believe her. I mean, they lie all the time, this administration. And that's what spokespeople do, is they lie. But the fact that she doesn't outright deny it, I think tells you they know full well they were responsible. So awful. I mean, I find it just so frustrating too. You know, I told you, I get angry at the demo because, and I lose it, right? I mean, I really do. I don't generally on air, but sometimes when I talk to some of these Democratic apologists or online, you know, on social media, I just lose it. The excuse is, well, Iran's really bad. Maybe what Trump's doing is wrong, but we have to stop them. We're the bad guys. We're the villains. U.S.-Israel is the axis of evil. There's no comparison between what the U.S. and Israel does in terms of the damage, the destruction, the number of people killed, the harm, the destabilization. There's no comparison between what we do and what any other country in the world does. We're that much worse. And Iran, nothing. They're not going into their neighbors. Look, India is causing all sorts of problems in Pakistan. There's always the threat of war between India and China over border skirmishes in Tibet, in the Tibetan Plateau. And those are huge countries, right? They both have over 1 billion people. So they're big, they're relatively wealthy, they have enormous military. Iran is a tiny little country, 3 times bigger than Iraq was. Yeah, I got it. But what, we're 40, 50 million people. You have 25, 30 times that many people in India and, maybe 25, 20 times that many in China. And even they aren't nearly as harmful worldwide as the U.S. I mean, I put Russia does a lot of the stuff with Ukraine's really bad. But I mean, come on, even with Ukraine, we provoked it. We didn't stop that. And, leaders around the world are terrified that they're going to be killed by Trump. So we're the bully. We have no moral authority whatsoever to call anybody out. There you see the 100 graves at a cemetery in Manab, Iran, for the children and teachers killed in the airstrike on Feb 28. It's just so terrible, so horrible. This is why I get so angry too, folks, because this failure to acknowledge by progressives, by people who are tied to the Democratic Party in some way, even if only by loyalty, that the Democrats are also responsible for this. It's just so awful. Two for it. Maybe they're not as bad. They're not, but hey, Trump wasn't in power when Israel began to systematically destroy Gaza. Trump wasn't in power. He didn't come into power till what? Well over a year later, 50,000 dead by then. Determining precisely what happened at Manab has been difficult because there's no investigation. There aren't forensic teams on the ground. They don't have visible weapons fragments from the arm. Outside reports, as I mentioned, can't reach the scene. But it looks like the many dead include over 175 people, children. So terrible. So that's one atrocity, one war crime we've committed. That's just violates every norm. Here's another one. This just came out. I saw this. I was just really it's almost worse. Because you can say, okay, fog of war, missile was, the school is actually near some military facility. Maybe these incredibly advanced weapons systems that apparently can target, within a few millimeters, what they're going to hit. Maybe there was some, who knows, maybe there was like a gust of wind that they didn't account for when they, made the decision where to strike. But there's no excuse for this. The U.S. Navy shot a training vessel, an Iranian training vessel, off the coast of Sri Lanka. It was not an armed vessel. It was a Navy vessel. It wasn't armed. This was before it had gone to Sri Lanka to participate in some kind of multinational training protocol. And while there, the U.S. attacked Iran unprovoked and then decided they were going to just sink a ship. What the hell? Colombo, right, that's the capital of Sri Lanka, wins praise after rescuing Iranian sailors and offering refuge to a second vessel, with observers saying the island nation chose humanitarian duty over geopolitics, right? Because Trump's not going to like it, right? The American tyrant doesn't like the fact that another country saved sailors who were just, drowning in the ocean as a direct result of the illegal action of the U.S. Navy. So Sri Lanka is drawing praise from analysts and commentators and social media after stepping into rescue and assist more than 200 Iranian sailors caught in the widening conflict, with many calling the island nation's response both courageous and principled. Who calls us courageous and principled? I haven't heard that. You know why it's courageous and principled? Because they're standing up to evil. They're standing up to this big, powerful bully that could just simply wipe them off the planet at any moment, and very well might. When have we acted that way? When have we stood up to the forces of wealth, of power, the military? When have we said no? I remember the Biden administration giving the Pentagon everything it wants. I can see Trump giving the Pentagon everything it wants, giving Netanyahu everything he wants. Where is this country saying no to the forces of darkness? It's not. And it's not just Trump. And it's not just the Republicans. Got to figure out a way out of this mess. And it isn't going to be through the Democratic Party. People like Josh Gottheimers, the people who are empowered. Look, Schumer let Joe Manchin basically call the shots when Biden was president. He didn't say no to Manchin. He didn't push at every opportunity for some type of progressive policies that would have made things just a little bit better for working people. Same with Joe Biden. And when they had opportunities, like, for example, true opportunities to hold the railroad industry to account, and to pay its workers, they said, no, we're not going to do that. So we got to go in a different direction. We got to go in a different direction. Sri Lankan Navy, Sri Lankan government saves 32 sailors and also recovered 87 bodies after the attack of an unarmed ship that we targeted. Is this a war crime by Hegseth? Well, that's what Common Dreams says, an article here by Brad Reed. If the U.S. is at war, then Hegseth is a war criminal. If it is not a war, then Pete Hegseth is a murderer. I think it's hard to argue that logic, right? You shoot a defenseless ship, an unarmed ship, you let the sailors drown. Either that is an act, that's a war crime, a crime during war, or it's just flat out murder. I don't see how there's any argument there. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. 240-242-5646. Quite extraordinary. U.S. didn't help rescue any of the shipwrecked men. In fact, the what makes it worse, I saw this meme, but I didn't use it because I wasn't able to confirm it. But I do trust Common Dreams. The meme said that the U.S. actually told the Iranian ship, yeah, go ahead. You're fine. You're good. Just go ahead. We're not going to, we're happy to participate with you. Now, I don't know. I can't quite confirm that, but what Dropsite and Common Dreams say is that the U.S. knew full well, and by the way, the missile or torpedo, I don't know, you call it a missile torpedo. I guess it's a torpedo as long as it stays under the water, under the waves. The attack by the U.S. submarine was premeditated as the U.S. was aware of the ship's presence. So it knew it was going to be there. And it wasn't like, oh, we just came across this enemy ship. In fact, the U.S. Navy was invited to participate in that event. And at the last minute dropped out, perhaps because it knew it was going to just blow up the ship. Hegseth was giddy. He was excited. He said, oh, yeah, this just shows our capabilities. This just shows our capabilities. And the failure to rescue the people that we stranded in the ocean, that's a hallmark of this administration. That's not like this is some rare crime by the Trump team. This is what they do. When they were shooting ships off Venezuela, Coast Guard calls off its search for people who jumped into the sea after watching the U.S. military destroy another ship. So you had two boats near each other off the coast of Venezuela for, no apparent reason. No, there was a claim they were drug smugglers. Apparently that was never confirmed whatsoever. There was no good reason to believe that. The Navy shoots down, sinks a ship. U.S. military sinks a ship. Nearby boat, people on that boat are terrified. They think we're going to get blown up. Better go in the sea. Anything's better. We'll float around in our life preservers. Anything's better than being on the boat when it gets hit. And after, a couple of hours, let's call it off. We don't need to look for those people. So that's who we have. That's who our administration is. Now, I thought it was interesting. I think it's really interesting that Trump has been, saying, oh, we're there to save the people of Iran. And, I urge them, they better practice regime change. Get rid of your leadership right now. Or you're really going to be facing our wrath. I've heard this argument from a lot of people. This is what people have said about Hamas. Well, it's the fault of the Palestinian people because they elected Hamas and then they never got rid of Hamas. So if they're going to be represented by Hamas, then I guess they have to be willing to accept genocide. FAFO, right? F around. Find out, you voted for Hamas in 2005, we know they were promoted by Netanyahu. He wanted extremists. He didn't want anyone who was going to talk peace. But, so what? And why didn't you get rid of them, even though they didn't have any elections and there was really no way you could do it? And Hamas was doing what little it could to try to make life just a little easier for the Palestinian people caught in that Israeli concentration camp between the Mediterranean Sea and the desert. But yeah, if you don't get rid of Hamas, well, then you're responsible for your own death at our hands, right? That's the argument. And that's what Trump is now saying to the people of Iran. Well, we're going to keep bombing you and blowing up your schools and killing your kids unless you get rid of your leaders. Well, I say then, given that logic, it's absolutely incumbent on us to get rid of our leaders. And I'd love to know how to do it. In fact, what I've called for over and over, we need to join together in support of true progressive, true pro-peace, pro-worker candidates at every opportunity. And we have them this year. We had one in 2024, actually. We had Jill Stein. We have one in California, Butch Ware. We have one in Maryland, Andy Ellis. There are some who are running as Democrats. I think Graham Plattner does meet that definition. But to the extent we can, we've got to look outside the Dem party. That's why I get so frustrated with organizers that I care about, that I think are doing their best, but just simply aren't, for whatever reason, capable of just recognizing, acknowledging that at bottom, the Democratic Party is part of the cancer that is metastasizing within our country and thence throughout the world. This is from a Facebook friend, somebody I know personally, had my run-ins with them before. They are sort of a media personality these days, written books, kind of a real centrist Dem type, a big Obama supporter. I don't identify them. I mean, I could. There's no reason for me not to. They're public to the extent, they're public on social media, and I think they're, by now, would be considered a public figure. But regardless, I don't like to do that. I don't like to, what's the word? Dox people, if that's the word. It's not about that. This is the attitude we see. This is basically the Democratic Party attitude over and over, the prefacing any criticism of Trump's war on the people of Iran with, well, Iran's really bad. We got to get rid of their leaders, but this isn't really the right way to do it. I think that's exactly what Gavin Newsom said. So this is what my Facebook friend writes. I spoke with Britain's GB News. I guess that means Great Britain News, I'm assuming. Or Good Morning. Is it Good Morning Britain? That's kind of a right-wing show. I don't know. GB News about the U.S. attack on Iran. Sooner or later, the Iranian regime would have had to be stopped from gaining nuclear weapons, but we have no reason to trust Trump's motivations or competence in doing it now. Well, I certainly agree with the latter part of that, but I don't agree with the former part. I mean, that Iran is is not one of the countries at the top of the list of those we have to prevent from getting nuclear weapons. And I made that point. I responded. I want to get it. This is because, again, so much that I find it's logic. I was so naive. I really believed that logical arguments, that facts, evidence would win. That in the end, people would say, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Maybe I've been wrong about this. And I was wrong. It doesn't work. It hasn't changed people's. I'm not very, very few exceptions. If any, do people change their minds? But again, the comment was, we have to stop Iran's nuclear capabilities. And I wrote, why did it have to be stopped? Why? Or a better question, why? And I don't disagree. It's better if we have fewer nuclear weapons, armed states, than more. Of course, that's better. And there are ways to address it, not this way. Or why isn't stopping Israel the first priority? Iran is about the only bulwark left. Right. So this is really important to think about. America, Israel, that's the axis of evil. In 1939, 40, 41, the axis of evil in Europe was Germany, Italy, really Germany, right? Italy was pretty much nothing by then. But the true force for genocide, for mass murder, was Hitler and Nazi Germany. So the priority had to be to stop the Nazis, not Russia. You could say, well, we don't want a nuclear-armed Russia. I agree. We didn't want one. We absolutely didn't want a nuclear-armed Soviet Union. But at that moment, stopping Hitler was the first priority. And the only bulwark in the summer of 41, the only force in Europe left against the Nazis was the Soviet Union in 1941, 42, 43. So would you expect Roosevelt and Churchill, acknowledging England, of course, the UK was never surrendered and Churchill was a great hero to stay, more probably than anybody else to stand up to Hitler, who recognized how evil Hitler was. And there's a lot of revisionist history about Churchill. He was a racist. He said all these awful things. And, I'm not going to deny he probably did say a lot of terrible things. I think sometimes we overstate what certain leaders may or may not have said or done because we want to cut them down to size. But look, I mean, what he did was so important, was so critical to Western civilization. Churchill did. I mean, I think you're kind of nitpicking sometimes when you point out some of the things he said. They're less crucial than stopping the Germans. And what Churchill said, I understand people say, well, you're Jewish and you're Eurocentric and you don't understand, well, what happened. And I get it. Some of the allegations against Churchill, especially with regard to India, are really, really bad. And it's unclear. I don't think it's ever been proven that he deliberately starved the Indian people. To the extent he did, obviously that's a terrible crime and he should have been held accountable for that. I don't want to get into that right here, but yes, I won't deny that. If Churchill deliberately starved or took actions that he knew were going to lead to the starvation of the many Indians who did die during World War II, then yeah, it was unforgivable. But in the moment, in 1940, 41, 42, 43, stopping Hitler was the first priority. And comparable, the comparison today is Israel. And shouldn't we recognize that stopping Israel is the first priority? Iran is about the only force left. That's why Israel is so determined to destroy Iran. Because Saudi Arabia has been cowed, Syria has been decapitated, Iraq is gone, Libya is gone. They're all gone. They're all just rubble. Lebanon is rubble. They're all rubble. So the only force left is Iran. Do we want Israel? Do you think it's right that Israel be in complete control of the Middle East without any potential threat to its hegemony, which means, of course, more killing, more destruction, more terror on its borders, within the country itself, on the West Bank, and full-on genocide continuing in Gaza. That's what will happen, will continue to happen, unless we somehow stop Israel. The only country in the region that really has any capability, any military capacity to stop Israel and willingness to use it is Iran. So I asked the question, why isn't stopping Israel the first priority? Iran is the only bulwark left against Israeli-American military hegemony. Shouldn't we be working with Iran to stop the Israeli genocide? Seems clear to me we should be. And the response just was so to this. This is like I said, Democratic partisan, hyper partisan, I think, Dem partisan. And the response is, I'm not going to ally with Iran. Iran is backwards, and they treat Israel, they treat women like crap, and this and that, and completely avoiding my point, saying I don't see a potential ally in a vicious dictatorship. See, this kind of language, it's all designed not to solve problems, right? Because what's the biggest problem in the Middle East right now? Genocide by Israel. That's the biggest problem. This language isn't designed to solve that problem. It's not designed to solve the other problems posed by Israel, turning its neighboring states into rubble. The attack on Iran actually is designed to make things even worse, right? To make things even more unstable. And the response to my comment is also designed not to solve problems in the Middle East. It's certainly not designed to help the women of Iran. It's just designed to prevent any kind of coalition building against Israel, against the United States' current policies. So depressing, so sad. Again, I don't know what we do, because I've basically given up on reaching people because they're not reachable so often. They have a financial stake in outcomes that are anti-human, anti-life. But I just want to point one other thing out. This is a Democrat. This is someone who is a out-and-out Trump hater, or at least presents as one. And the propaganda, the Hasbara, and it's not designed to call this one person out. It's saying this is who the Democratic Party, so much of it is. The excuse, well, when Israel kills civilians, it's violating its principles. Is it? What Israeli principle says we don't kill Palestinians? I'm not aware of that principle. The principle that I'm aware of that Israel seems to live by is we're the Jewish state. If you're not Jewish, you're not part of our state. You're outside. You're not the people, right? The people are the Jews. We're the ones God promises land to. If you're in our way, good luck. God bless you. Hope Allah protects you, because God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob sure as hell ain't. That's the Israeli principle with which I'm familiar. But let's say that there really was some principle, some higher principle that Israel lived by. No, all life is sacred, and we're not going to kill Arabs. We're not going to kill Muslims. We're not going to kill Druze or Christian Palestinians. We're not about that. And yet they were doing it. Who cares about their damn principle? The people that Israel's killed, they're not going to take any comfort from the fact, the families, they're not taking any comfort from the fact that Israel's violating its principles. And then this is just complete, utter horse crap. Iran's regime is founded on the genocide of Jews. Complete nonsense, along with at least mass killing of Western civilians. Iran's current regime was founded in reaction to the Shah, who was an imposed Western despot put in power by the CIA after Iran elected a socialist, Mossadegh, who wanted to nationalize the oil companies and keep the wealth in the 1950s, for the Iranian people. And the West said, nope, that ain't going to happen. That oil is ours. We get it's on your land, and we'll be happy to throw a few $1 million to an Iranian who, keeps the oil flowing into our refineries, of course. But we're going to take the lion's share of the profits. And you try to stop us, well, we're going to depose you, and we're going to put somebody in power who will keep it going the way we want it. And that was the Shah, Pahlavi, and he was in power for 20 plus years. And ultimately, the Iranian people had it, and they revolted. There was a revolution. And as is so often the case with revolutions, the successors, the winners of the revolution were not particularly good people. They were theocrats. They were violent. They were willing to use power. They were willing to use violence to keep their power. But to claim that somehow that regime was founded on the genocide of Jews is utterly a complete lie. And it's, again, so frustrating. What do you do with these people? I just don't have an answer. That's why I do this, but I get angry. We're in such a bad place. And so many people who are ostensibly allies are not making things worse and worse and worse. All right. 1241, see the chat. Great analysis. Thank you so much. CBND, you are my greatest friend. I always used to say this about Ari. Haven't seen Ari. Ari, if you're in there, check it out. Check me out. Give me a call, what have you. I'm sure you're just really busy because I know you comment still, which I really appreciate it. I love the love, though. Thank you so much, CP. And let's see if we've got anything on Facebook. I'm not seeing comments there, although I'm hearing my music in the background. Try not to have that happen. No comments on Facebook, but yes, in the chat on YouTube. But I guess this is a good opportunity to just call on folks. Hey, if you're watching, if you're part of Halitics, if you like what we're doing here, please, if you haven't yet done so, subscribe. If you have, like, and appreciate all the comments, and also share anything that you think is helpful. Share. Now, I don't like to just make this a pity party. I don't like to just complain and whine. What I really want is solutions. And all I can do is say, hey, vote for Greens, because I know we say get out in the street. And I've said we've got to change regime, right? Trump wants regime change. I say we need regime change here. But how we get that? We thought we had hope that there was going to be change in 2008. We didn't get it. Obama said, make me do it. We tried. I don't know what the answer is at this point. Except, like I've said, we've got to unite against both parties. That's why I get so frustrated, the organizers who do have some power, some ability to. I remember back when I was working for Our Revolution, the turn of 2000 into 2001, when the Force the Vote was coming up. And when I first looked at Force the Vote, which was calling on the quote squad, unquote, to withhold votes for Nancy Pelosi to be speaker, unless she agreed to put Medicare for all to a vote before the entire House. And I thought it was a great idea. When I first heard about it, I thought it was a good idea. Then I heard some criticism of it, which I thought, well, wait, maybe it isn't such a good idea. The big fear was that if the squad keeps Pelosi from winning the vote, Kevin McCarthy, the Republican minority leader, could become elected speaker. And that seemed like a real legitimate worry until I heard the specific analysis that explained, no, that's not how it works. You can only be Speaker of the House if you get a majority of all votes cast. So as long as that, quote, squad, unquote, voted for somebody who wasn't Kevin McCarthy, he could never become Speaker because only a minority of the total House, Republicans who were a minority, they did not control the House of Representatives going into 2001. Even if every Republican voted for McCarthy, as long as that squad withheld their votes from Pelosi, but did vote for somebody else, could have been Pramila Jayapal, could have been Bernie Sanders, could have been anybody. As long as they didn't vote for Kevin McCarthy, he could never become Speaker. And so the whole idea that, well, you're making it possible for McCarthy to become Speaker was absurd on its face. I think it was, and this was one of the reasons I really used to dislike Sam Cedar. I thought it was Sam Cedar say, well, but some of those conservative Democrats, maybe they'll get fed up The Josh Gottheimers, they'll get sick of this game if you have 10 votes and every single time 210 Democrats vote for, 215 Democrats vote for Pelosi, but you have like 6 or 7 don't, and that keeps her from getting majority. They'll get sick of it and they'll vote for McCarthy. I don't ever think that would happen. But if it does, it does. Then okay, well, then that's on you. We're not going to vote for Pelosi unless we get real concessions, unless we extract from her real meaningful promises. That's what they should have done. I remember talking about this when I was with Our Revolution. And I am embarrassed to say at one point, I said, well, we don't want McCarthy to be speaker. This was in front of like a big group of activists. And I was wrong there. But later on, I brought this up to the leadership. And I was in leadership, I guess, or at least I was a staffer who, had direct access to leadership. I said, yeah, this is a good idea. We should do it. No. We can't do that. No. It's a terrible idea. No. They just weren't willing. These institutions, these organizations, the leadership sees itself as part of the Democratic Party. The Sunrise Movement, Progressive Democrats of America, heck, they have Democrats in their name. Even DSA, they see themselves ultimately as part of the Democratic Party. National Nurses United. And they won't turn on it. They won't, no matter how often they're betrayed, no matter how often the principles that they claim to espouse are just shredded by the party. Doesn't matter. That's who we are. Got to vote green whenever you can. So Luigi Mangione no longer faces death penalty. This is breaking news. Came out just this morning. Good to know. Judge Margaret Garnett dismissed 2 charges against Mangione, including one that carried the death penalty. I was a little surprised by this. I didn't really understand when I read the story. I'm glad he shouldn't get the death penalty. So much better that he doesn't. I hope he's acquitted. I'd love to see jury nullification in this case. If I were on that jury, I live in New York City, so I can say this. If I lived in New York City and there was a 1 in a 7 million, well, there's 7 million New Yorkers, maybe there's 6 million, 5.5 million adult New Yorkers, and 12 of them will serve on that jury. I guess you have to live, I don't know how where the juries are impaneled from, the whole city or a certain district. But let's say I lived in the district. Let's say there was like a 1 in a million shot or 1 in 100,000 shot I could get on that jury. I wouldn't say this. I wouldn't say what I'm going to say now, because then I couldn't get on the jury. But if I were on that jury, I would vote to acquit Mangione. He could take the witness and, oh yeah, I took my gun and I put it up against that bloodsucker's head and I pulled it. I'd vote to acquit him. Because we have no options to get Medicare for all, because we don't have allies in government who are for the people. Because the CEOs of healthcare organizations absolutely are making millions and millions by presiding over the deaths of many, many Americans who should be alive today. They're presiding over the bankruptcies of many, many Americans who should not be bankrupt, who should not be impoverished. So I would vote to acquit Mangione if I were on a jury. I hope that's what happens. I'm glad he won't be executed. I was very confused at first when I read this in the New York Times. I had to do a little more research, so that's why I'm kind of talking about it. I think it might be confusing to people. Mr. Mangione was indicted on 4 charges in his federal case, including 2 stalking counts, a firearms offense, and 1 count of using a firearm to commit murder, which carries a maximum sentence of death. His lawyers had asked the judge to dismiss the firearms-related counts because they rely on classifying the stalking counts as crimes of violence. So I was trying to understand what that means, like why that would happen, because he clearly, the facts, the charge, the allegation is he shot the CEO, whose name escapes me for the moment. He shot the CEO, the United Healthcare CEO. He shot him, killed him with a gun, right? Well, how is that not using a firearm to commit murder? It is. There's no question that's what it is. But you can't. But then I was thinking more and more about this. That's not a real crime, right? I mean, that's not like there's no such common law crime as using a firearm to commit a murder. The crime is murder. And the person is dead at your hands. It doesn't matter if you use a gun, a knife, your bare hands, poison. Any way you kill somebody is murder. So there's no additional crime called firearm murder with a firearm. That's not a special crime. But I finally figured this out. What they have in New York State or New York City, or I guess it's federal. It must be federal law. Well, I guess it's federal law because he was being charged in federal court. It's an enhanced penalty if you commit a felony murder. So it has to be a felony murder to get the death penalty. And you commit the felony murder with a firearm. Like, let's say you rob a bank. Okay, that's a violent crime. You go into a bank with a gun and you hold up the teller. That in and of itself is a violent crime. It's a crime of violence. And then the teller, you see the teller step on a alarm button. So you kill the teller with a gun. That is a crime that would be subject, I believe, to the death penalty under federal law because you committed a violent crime and then you committed murder with a firearm. So it's an enhanced penalty that's only available to prosecutors when a violent crime is accompanied by a murder with a gun. And the judge said, hey, yeah, he stalked him. Yeah, he lay in wait, right? Because Mangione was deliberately targeting this guy and waited around for him. But that's not considered a violent crime. Stalking in and of itself would not be considered a violent crime. If it was like rape, if it was assault, then yes. Then it would be a crime that the prosecution could, in fact, get a death penalty conviction. So that's interesting. I learned something new. I thought I'd share that. 240-242-5646, 240-240-2. So they're saying, couldn't they charge him with assault with a deadly weapon? Well, it's not a separate crime because the assault with that's from Ken. The assault with a deadly weapon was the actual murder itself. So no. Now there's in tort law, there's assault and there's battery. Assault is when you menace somebody and you put them under fear, legitimate, reasonable fear of violence. Battery is when you actually hit them, batter them, right? Battery, batter. But in criminal law, assault with a deadly weapon is when you assault somebody with a deadly weapon. And the assault was where you hit, where you actually strike them, either with your fists or with a weapon. So the assault was the murder. Now, let's say that Mangione had actually approached the executive and demanded money from him, right? Give me your wallet. And then the executive had fought back. I think then you could, and Mangione had shot him at that point, then you could charge him with murder with a firearm. But because the assault itself was the murder. All right, Kristi Noem gone. No, some people really interested in that. Yeah, I did. I used to be a lawyer, but I don't know. I didn't do criminal law, but this was just the research I did coming up with that answer. So I think that's the reason. It wasn't a separate assault. Let's say that there had been two people. The executive had been with his spouse, and he'd gone up to the spouse with a gun and started hitting her with a gun for some reason, and then shot the executive. That would also be eligible for the enhancement. But you have to have a separate crime of violence. And then the murder with the gun is part of that fact pattern, then you can charge the death penalty. You'd seek the death penalty. Noam's bungling proves too much even for Trump. And Aaron Rupar, who I like, and I don't usually quote him, but I think this is a good point. This is from today. So Noam is gone, and she was really hearing it from the Republicans. More, she embarrassed the Republican Party. She had some ass where she was, I guess, riding a horse right in front of the, is that right? In front of the Mount Rushmore. And she said, oh yeah, Trump approved those ads, which he apparently didn't, or at least he didn't maybe he did approve them, but he didn't want to acknowledge he approved them, and he felt embarrassed. She shamed him. She really ticked off the MAGA base with her comments about guns, prosecuting or demeaning to, attacking the victim in Minneapolis, the nurse who had the gun, saying he shouldn't have brought his gun to the protest. A lot of MAGA people really upset about that. So Freddie, right? Freddie was the victim of ICE. So all of that, ultimately Trump decided she had to go. And Rupar says, well, this is good. She's really bad. She's corrupt. She's a liar. So we're glad she's gone. Accountability is still possible. And I give him, yeah. I mean, you want people who do really bad things to be gone. I mean, we'd like Trump to be gone. The problem is that we get this guy. It's sort of like what I was thinking about is the campaign to defeat Matt Gaetz for Attorney General when he was clearly a less bad alternative than what we got, Pam Bondi. And there just wasn't really much thought behind it. It was just like, well, let's get rid of Gaetz. And I think also Gaetz, some of the donors, the Democratic donors didn't like Gaetz, right? Because he had spoken out against big tech. He wasn't for it. If he was the Attorney General, they were afraid he might actually, stymie mergers, big tech mergers. He was a guy who acknowledged the climate crisis. He might have been somebody who, oh my God, he's going to actually prosecute polluters. So the Democratic Party got to placate its donors while pretending it was somehow standing up for justice by going after Matt Gaetz, whose record admittedly wasn't great. Certainly not when it comes to underage women. Apparently he had sex with a 17-year-old prostitute. But that's not why ultimately the Democrat Party gave a rat's fat butt about Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz also had been pretty outspoken for a Republican, for anybody, had been willing to criticize Israel. So the Democrats torpedoed his nomination and they got Pam Bondi. Gee, that worked out really well. So I was thinking about that. You get rid of Kristi Noem and you get this guy, Markwayne Mullins. Now, it's not quite the same because Kristi Noem was awful. There were some redeeming qualities. There are some redeeming qualities to Matt Gaetz. There, far I can tell, none with regard to Kristi Noem. And fine, let's get Markwayne Mullins out of Congress because he's, out of the Senate because he's terrible. So, yeah, I'm glad this happened, but I'm not going to be dancing a jig. Do I have the video? Why don't I have my video here? Let's see if we can get it to play. I think I do have a video here. Here we go.
You'll concede this is war. You'll concede this is war.
We haven't declared war. They declared war on us, but we haven't.
War, and Secretary Hicks.
All right, so what a clown this guy is. He was asked, and this isn't really going to Department of Homeland Security, but he's like, oh yeah, they haven't declared war on us. Or no, we haven't declared war on them. They declared war on us. As far as I know, Iran has not declared war on the United States. I think they're saying the justification is, well, since 1979, they've declared war on the West, some sort of generalized declaration. But what this really, really put in mind, that statement, oh yeah, well, we didn't declare war on them. They declared war on us. This reminded me of the way Hitler started World War II. Oh yeah, Poland attacked us, right? Poland started it. With their cavalry, right? With they sent horses against tanks, against panzers. Yeah, it was Poland's fault. And that's what you got from Mark Wayne Mullen. So the same tactics, the same just enormous lie. And some people believe it, I suppose. Just a little bit more because Mullen, yeah, what did he? Oh, yeah. Well, the rest of it, who cares? So he just makes a big mistake. He says, well, he calls it war, and then he says it wasn't. No, I misspoke. It was a misspoke. Well, misspoke isn't a noun. Misspoke is not a noun. It's a past participle of misspeak, but okay, you misspoke. Yes. You didn't say, you said the quiet part out loud. Yes, it's war. Yes, you're destroying Israel. It's awful. I mean, yes, U.S. and Israel are destroying Iran and much of the rest of the world. Vote green, because you ain't going to get a Democratic, you ain't going to get some Democrats join with Republicans to prevent any accountability for Trump, any law that would have said, no, you have to get approval from Congress was defeated both in the House and the Senate with some Democrats. I don't know if any Democrats in the Senate supported that defeating that bill, but I would be shocked if there wasn't at least one or two. But maybe there weren't. I don't know. Maybe they didn't have to because they knew it was going to go down to defeat. U.S. lost 92,000 jobs in February. So the economy not doing so well. And I bring this up because I know Democrats are going to say, oh, this is great for us. We're so happy that people are getting thrown out of work because it means we have a better chance to win in November. It is always a mistake, especially if you're a Democrat, to rely on metrics like, especially the stock market, to bolster your hopes of getting reelected. Right, or of hopes of getting elected, of defeating the Republicans. Yes, if unemployment rates rise, and apparently they did, that is better for the party out of power. I don't know that a buoyant stock market necessarily helps a party in power or hurts a party out of power that much. Because really very few Americans are profiting from the stock market in any meaningful way. I mean, yeah, your pension might go up a little bit or your retirement, but most Americans don't even have pensions. Most Americans don't have any kind of retirement except for Social Security, which is under attack. So, I don't think the stock market is a proxy for how people feel. I don't think there's a correlation between the stock market's performance and how people feel about the economy. Jobs lost, this probably will help Democrats a little bit, but you also have to wonder whose jobs are lost. If they're federal workers, they're really important. The termination of so many federal workers and federal jobs has been really bad for Americans in many, many ways. People who depend on any kind of government services are hurt. And so many do. Needy people, employees who are being mistreated and are looking for some kind of help from OSHA or from EEOC, Department of Labor. That's gone. So, yes, it's bad when we see the government shrunk so that small that can be choked in a bathtub. But the jobs lost are mostly Democrats. Democrats are the ones who generally are government workers. And so it's not like those people who just got fired are going to necessarily start voting Democratic after voting Republican. They weren't going to vote Republican anyway. And so many Republicans really don't, they only care about just like everyone really only cares about their own jobs. Lots of Democrats kept voting for Democrats even after NAFTA and all the free trade deals, most favored nation status for China, devastated the heartland, devastated industrial workers, didn't stop government service workers from voting Democratic. So there's no reason to believe Republican voters will stop supporting Trump because there's a loss of some government jobs. But that said, yeah, it's a positive for Democrats, but I wouldn't get giddy fellow Americans losing their jobs at this point. I think what you have to say if you're a Democrat is this is what our plan is. to get more people employed. This is what our plan is, to protect you if you lose your job. All right, final story. This is why I'm so, many reasons, but so just fed up completely with the Democratic Party. And this is a Maryland story, Maryland-based story. So I'm in Maryland. We'll talk about Maryland. Policy, I believe, is essential. Medicare for all. Guarantee every single person in this country health care. No charge at point of delivery. No charge for receiving. You go to the emergency room, you don't get a bill. You go to your doctor, you get a mammogram, there's no bill. There's no copay, there's nothing. You get medication for your diabetes, you don't have to pay for the insulin. That is a minimum requirement of democracy, of freedom, of economic justice. When Jocelyn Pena-Melnick was chosen unanimously last year, at the end of last year, to be the Maryland House Speaker, I had kind of mixed feelings. She has been described as a progressive. I think in some ways she is a progressive. I do believe that representation matters to a degree. So she describes herself as an African Latina or Afro-Latina. I'm not sure the exact term that she uses. It says here she is the first, you can't read it, but I can read it. Maybe you can read it. She is the first Afro-Latina presiding officer in the history of the Maryland General Assembly. So that's progress. When Obama was elected president, I was like, yeah, it's really good to have a black president. That says something about the voters. I think it's a positive. But I also had experience with Jocelyn Pena-Melnick. And even though I know she's described as a progressive and someone who cares about the underdog, and she's from poverty herself, I had experience with her. I've been to events where I had specifically said to her, well, where do you stand on Healthy Maryland, which is single payer, everyone in, nobody out, and no charge at point of delivery. And she was like, well, there's other ways to go, and we have to have all the stakeholders, and, the typical kind of balancing test kind of crap you get in response to, the word salads. When there's no balancing test. The right policy, the best policy, the most efficient policy is single payer. And in this case, it would be Healthy Maryland, Sheila Ruth's proposal. And Jocelyn Pena-Melnick refused to say that. She refused to endorse it. Jamie Raskin was at that event. I think he made some kind of, well, if we could get it, it'd be nice, but, we have to be realists. Well, my skepticism about Jocelyn Pena-Melnick was very well founded. And this was shared by somebody who is a very staunch Democratic supporter, who has insisted you have to vote blue no matter who. And they pointed out that this event is being sponsored by an anti-Medicare for All group, an anti-single payer group. The group is called Maryland Healthcare for All. Basically, they're a front group for Johns Hopkins Medical Center, for the University of Maryland Medical Center, whose CEOs of those two august institutions, incredibly prestigious, right? I mean, Johns Hopkins, is that the best medical school in the world? If it ain't, it's right there with Harvard and Stanford and Cal, I guess. It's right there. It's like this. Baltimore takes a lot of pride, and understandably so, in Johns Hopkins. But they're not a good citizen in the city. They and the University of Maryland Medical Center, also super prestigious, also very highly regarded, highly ranked. Their CEOs are making many millions of dollars. And a lot of that is, how do we squeeze the most money out of the people who come into our hospitals, either out of them or their insurance? How do we get the most for ourselves? How do we justify it? And they back this group called Maryland. They're the huge funders of this group, Maryland Healthcare for All. Sounds great, healthcare for all. But and some of their policies, sound really good. They're not awful. They are working to keep a lot of important medications affordable, to prevent the big pharma from jacking up prices for insulin and other drugs that are essential. But in the end, they're just trying to keep the system that enriches them, gives them tremendous influence. Keep it going. If the system, because what some of these centrist moderates, Democrats do is they look at the system now and they say, this just isn't sustainable. People just can't keep this going. It's like a casino that starts taking, I think most casinos somewhere around 10 cents, somewhere between 5 and 10 cents on every dollar gambled. Right. So if you bet $100, every time you bet $100, you're likely to lose about 5, right? So if you start taking 10%, 15%, 20%, and you're a casino, you bankrupt your customers. They lose so much so quick that they can't even come back. Or if they could come back, they won't, because it's just too expensive at some point. And even though people go to these casinos because they're addicts, they can't really control themselves. At some point, they just lose so much so quickly, they just stop going. So the casino industry regulates itself. They say, well, we want to keep the rake, the house rake, as high as it can be to maximize our profits. At some point, it's so high we make less money. And even if maybe at 40, 50% per bet, we would keep some of the gamaholics, the addicts, people who do go for casual, right? They want to go for fun. They think it's fun. I don't think casino gambling is fun. Some people, maybe they think it's fun. They think, oh, well, I could win. Maybe I'll lose. I'll probably lose, but I could win. But if you're going to lose your $5,000 that you bring to Vegas, or your $2,000, whatever it is, in the first half hour, it's not really fun. You're like, I don't want to go anymore. I'm not going to do that. And you also might go to another casino in another state. So the Gambling Commission tries to regulate and keep the house rake within tolerable limits. It's not because they could care less about the customer, the gambler. They don't care. They just want to maximize their profits. That's what this Maryland Healthcare for All is. We'll give you a few things. We'll give you some more affordable medication. We'll keep the costs of, emergency room treatments within tolerable limits for most Marylanders because we're such good people. Except what they're really saying is, we'll do that because in the end, we'll maximize our profits, because we don't want to kill that golden goose. So that's who Maryland Healthcare for All is. If there was any real concern for the people of Maryland and their healthcare, and by the way, for doctors and nurses and healthcare providers, they would be staunch advocates for Medicare for all, for single payer, for healthcare, for healthy Maryland. So it's a single payer within the state. And look who's going to that fundraiser. Who's the special guest? Jocelyn Pena-Melnick, and also Delegate Colson, who's a Democrat as well. So they're giving they're giving credibility to this industry front group, for-profit front group. That's the most powerful Democrat in the state of Maryland, Jocelyn Pena-Melnick, except for Wes Moore, who also opposes, by the way, Healthy Maryland. And you can see, if you didn't already get it, just look at those prices. If this was a group that cared about the people, would they be charging $1,000 to a celebration sponsor couple, $400 at the general reception? I mean, who's fooling who? We get it. You're a bunch of fat cats. You're engorging yourself. You've got blood money. The blood money, Marylanders desperate to just stay alive, getting health care, getting medication, medicine, treatment. And you just want to make sure you keep getting your 20%, 30% cut on top of everything else. And that's what Maryland Healthcare for All is. And that's who the progressive, up from nothing, Democratic House Speaker Jocelyn Pena-Melnick supports. This is why I I just can't take the constant apologies, the excuses, the explanations that so many who should know better offer for this party. I just can't take it anymore. It just drives me absolutely crazy. And I vote green, man. That's all I can tell you. Vote green. I'll be back Monday. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much for being part of Halitics.